The first thing my future daughter-in-law ever said about me in public was not hello. It was not nice to meet you. It was not thank you for raising the man I'm about to marry. It was, you actually invited the nanny. She said it softly, but not softly enough. That was the cruelty of it. Women like Vanessa Whitmore never whispered because they wanted to hide what they said. They whispered because they wanted only the right people to hear it. The bride's friends. The groom's relatives. The waiter standing close enough to pretend he had not heard. The mother in the navy silk dress standing 3 feet away, holding a gift box wrapped in silver paper, suddenly feeling as if the entire restaurant had tilted beneath her shoes. Me. I was the mother. My name was Eleanor Bennett, though for 31 years my son had called me Mom, Mama, or when he was little and feverish, Mommy. That evening, I had dressed carefully. Not extravagantly. Carefully. A deep navy dress with long sleeves. Pearls my late husband, Thomas, had given me for our 20th anniversary. Low heels because my knees were not as forgiving as my pride. My hair pinned neatly at the back of my neck. A light touch of lipstick. He had stood in front of the mirror before leaving home and smiled at my reflection like a woman trying to make peace with a difficult night. My son, Daniel, was getting engaged. Not married yet. Engaged. Though a woman who had never once invited me to lunch, never called me by my first name, never sent a birthday card without Daniel reminding her, and once told me across a Thanksgiving table that some mothers struggle to let go because they never built their own identity. At the time, Daniel had looked down at his plate. That was the part that hurt most. Back 2 weeks before the engagement dinner, he came to my house alone. He stood in my kitchen at 9:30 at night, rain dripping from his coat, and looked more like the boy I raised than the corporate attorney he had become. Mom, he said, I need you to come to the dinner. Of course I am coming. No, he said. I mean I need you to come, no matter what happens. He set down the tea towel. Daniel. His jaw tightened. Vanessa's family thinks you were my nanny. He stared at him. For a moment, the kitchen was so quiet I could hear rain tapping the window above the sink. Excuse-me. He swallowed. She told them you worked for that family when I was young. She said that side raised me. She said you were around, but not really family. I remember feeling my fingers go cold. My husband had died 7 years earlier, but grief still had certain rooms inside me. That sentence walked straight into one of them. Why would she say that? Danielle's expression hardened in a way I had rarely seen. Because she thought it made me more useful. Useful. That was a strange word to use about a fiancé. Then he said something stranger. I need you to trust me. Just through dinner. Trust you with what? His eyes shone, but he did not cry. My revenge. So yes, when Vanessa Whitmore looked at me across the glittering private dining room of Le Midoide and whispered, you actually invited the nanny. I froze. Not because I was surprised. Because even when you know a knife is coming, the first cut still shocks the body. The room was beautiful in the cold way expensive rooms often are. Crystal chandeliers. Pale marble floors. Gold rim plates. With the roses climbing silver stands. A long table set for 28 people beneath soft amber lighting. Champagne flutes caught the glow like tiny torches. Vanessa stood near the head of the table wearing a champagne-colored dress that looked less like an engagement dress and more like a threat. Her blonde hair fell in polished waves over one shoulder. A diamond bracelet flashed on her wrist when she lifted her hand to cover her mouth, pretending her insult had been accidental. Her mother, Claudia Whitmore, turned slowly to look at me. Her smile was smooth and empty. Oh, Claudia said. How sweet. Vanessa's friends glanced at one another. One of them smirked. Her father, Richard Whitmore, did not even bother to stand. He held the silver gift box tighter. Inside was my husband's watch. Thomas had worn it on the day Daniel was born. He wore it to Daniel's first piano recital. His high school graduation. His law school ceremony. The night he sat at our kitchen table, yellow under the old pendant light, and told me quietly that the doctor had used the word aggressive. Before he died, Thomas placed the watch in my hand and said, give it to him when he becomes the kind of man who understands time. He had brought it that night because I wanted to believe my son had become that man. Then Vanessa called me the nanny. My face burned. My throat tightened. For one terrible second, all I wanted was to leave. To walk back through those glass doors. To take my dignity, my pearls, my dead husband's watch, and my foolish hope home. Then Daniel appeared beside me. He did not rush. He did not make a scene. He simply crossed the room, took my hand in front of everyone, and lowered his voice. Ma'am, he whispered, trust me. Just tonight. His hand was warm. His grip was steady. Then he added, so quietly only I could hear. It's time for us to get our revenge. He looked at him. Really looked. And for the first time in months, my son did not look ashamed. He looked ready. Daniel turned to the room and smiled. Everyone, he said clearly, I'd like you to meet my mother, Eleanor Bennett. The word mother landed like a glass cracking. Vanessa's face changed. Just slightly. A flique. A flash of panic she buried under a laugh. Oh, Daniel, she said brightly. I was just teasing. You know how I am. Yes, Daniel said. His smile did not move. Edo. That was when I realized something. He had walked into that room thinking I was the target. But Daniel had brought me there as the witness. And Vanessa had no idea the dinner had already stopped being hers. For the first 30 minutes, Daniel let Vanessa perform. That was what made him dangerous that night. He did not defend too quickly. He did not raise his voice. He did not rush to punish her. He simply allowed her to become more herself in front of witnesses. Vanessa recovered beautifully after her first mistake. He had to give her that. She glided toward me, took both my hands as if we were old friends, and kissed the air near my cheek. Eleanor, I'm mortified, she said. My humor is terrible. Please forgive me. The room watched. He smiled. Women my age learn to smile in hostile rooms. It is not weakness. It is armor thin enough to pass for manners. Of course, I said. Her fingers tightened over mine. A warning. Her smile widened. Daniel talks about you all the time. No, I don't, Daniel said. The room went silent for half a second. Vanessa laughed quickly. Well, when he does. Daniel's eyes rested on her face. When I do, he repeated. Claudia Whitmore clapped her hands once, crisp and bright. Champagne, everyone. Let's not stand around like strangers. That was a command, not hospitality. People moved. Chairs scraped softly. Waiters poured champagne. The Whitmore cousins arranged themselves in little clusters of silk and expensive watches. Daniel's colleagues from the firm took their seats with the cautious expressions of people who had sensed tension but not yet identified the source. He was seated halfway down the table. Not beside Daniel. Not near the head. Not even with his godfather or his college roommate. My place card read. MRS, Eleanor Bennett. Family friend. Family friend. He looked at it for a long moment. Then I felt Daniel's hand on the back of my chair. Actually, he said, lifting the card, this is wrong. Vanessa turned quickly. The planner did the seating. Then the planner made a mistake. He took my card and walked to the head table. He picked up the card beside his own. Claudia Whitmore. He moved Claudia's card one seat down. Then he placed mine beside his. Daniel, Vanessa said, still smiling, my mother is hosting. No, Daniel said. My mother is sitting beside me. There are silences that are empty. This one was full. Claudia's face tightened. Richard Whitmore finally looked up from his phone. Vanessa's smile thinned until it almost disappeared. Then, with the skill of a woman raised to weaponize elegance, she laughed. Of course. How sweet. Daniel pulled out my chair. He sat beside him. Across from me, Claudia adjusted her napkin with sharp little movements. Vanessa leaned close to Daniel. He could not hear everything she said, but I heard enough. Jure embarrassing me. Daniel picked up his water glass. Not yet. Her face went still. Dinner vegan. The first course was lobster bisque served in shallow white bowls. Vanessa spoke loudly about the wedding venue, a vineyard estate in Napa that had once hosted a senator's daughter. We wanted intimate, she said, meaning expensive. Just family, close friends, a few important business relationships. Her friend Mallory leaned in the dress. Vanessa smiled as if modesty pained her. Custom. Paris. Claudia added, the Whitmore women believe weddings should reflect legacy. I felt Daniel's shoulder move slightly beside me. Legacy. That word would come back later. He did not know it then, but Daniel had placed every loaded word in that room like kindling and waited for Vanessa's family to strike the match. Richard Whitmore lifted his glass toward Daniel. Speaking of legacy, son, I admit, when Vanessa first brought you home, I had my doubts. Daniel smiled politely. Did you? Richard chuckled. No offense. Jure obviously bright. Good firm. Strong income. But marriage into a family like ours requires more than resume. It requires discretion. Vanessa touched Daniel's arm. Daddy. No, Richard said. A man should know what he's stepping into. Daniel glanced at me. Just 11. Then back at Richard. And what am I stepping into? Richard leaned back. A name. He looked at the polished silverware beside my plate and almost laughed. The Whitmore name sounded grand if you did not read newspapers closely. The Whitmores owned a real estate development company. They had money, or appeared to. They had donated to museums, hosted charity galas, sponsored youth sailing events. Vanessa's Instagram was a catalog of resorts, charity luncheons, tennis whites, and captions about gratitude written from private terraces. But Thomas had taught me something long before he died. Old money rarely announces itself. New money announces itself loudly. Desperate money announces itself constantly. Richard Whitmore had not stopped announcing. Daniel said, a name can mean many things. Richard laughed. Exactly. It opens doors. Vanessa looked at me with a small smile. Eleanor understands service families, don't you? There it was again. Service families. Not working families. Not middle-class families. Service. My spoon paused over the bisque. Daniel's voice was calm. What does that mean, Vanessa? She blinked. Oh, I didn't mean anything bad. What did you mean? The table quieted again. Vanessa laughed, but the sound was thinner now. Daniel, don't cross-examine me at our engagement dinner. I'm not cross-examining. I'm asking. Her eyes flashed. I meant your mother has always been very hands-on. Domestique. Nurturing. It's lovely. Domestique. Nurturing. Words women like Vanessa used when they wanted to call another woman low-class but did not want to stain their own mouths. He placed my spoon down. Before I could speak, Daniel smiled. She was a surgical nurse for 26 years. Vanessa's face froze. Claudia's hand stopped over her wineglass. Daniel continued, she ran trauma teams, trained residents, and once kept a man alive for 12 minutes with her hand inside his chest while waiting for a surgeon. The room shifted. A man from Daniel's firm muttered, Jesus. Daniel looked at Vanessa. So yes. Very hands-on. For the first time that night, Vanessa had no answer. He stared at my son. I knew. I remembered. All those years I came home exhausted from the hospital, changed shoes in the garage so I would not track blood into the house, and cooked dinner before helping him with homework. All those mornings I drove him to school after a night shift because Thomas had court. All those holidays I missed, all those stories I never told because I did not want my child carrying the weight of my work. I remembered. My throat tightened. Daniel leaned slightly toward me. Trust me, he whispered again. I nodded. The second course arrived. Salad with figs, goat cheese, and candied walnuts. Vanessa did not eat. Claudia did not look at me. Richard drank too quickly. The first crack had appeared in the polished Whitmore glass. Then Vanessa made her second mistake. She raised her champagne flute and smiled at the room. Since everyone is here, she said, Daniel and I have an announcement. Daniel's hand stilled beside his plate. He saw it. So did Vanessa. She smiled wider. We decided, she continued, that after the wedding, Daniel will be taking my last name. The table erupted in delighted surprise from the Whitmore side. Claudia pressed one hand to her heart. Richard laughed proudly. Vanessa looked directly at me. It just makes sense, she said. Some names carry more weight than others. Daniel slowly set down his fork. Then he smiled. A small smile. A dangerous one. Interesting, he said. Vanessa's eyes narrowed. What? I'm just surprised. Why? Daniel reached into the inside pocket of his jacket. Because according to the documents you sent my attorney yesterday, you're not planning to marry me as Vanessa Whitmore. Her face drained. He placed a folder on the table. You're planning to marry me as Vanessa Cole. The room went dead silent. Richard stopped smiling. Claudia whispered, Daniel. He looked from my son to the bride. Vanessa stared at the folder like it had crawled out of a grave. Daniel turned the first page around. At the top were 2 words. Prenuptial agreement. And underneath them. Vanessa Marie Cole, formerly Vanessa Marie Whitmore. Daniel looked at Richard. So before we discuss whose name carries more weight, he said, maybe your family should explain why your daughter legally changed hers 3 years ago. No one at the Whitmore table moved. The waiters froze near the wall. A violinist in the corner lowered his bow. The engagement dinner had been designed for spectacle, but not this one. Vanessa reached for the folder. Daniel placed one hand lightly over it. No. Her eyes flashed. This is private. So was my mother's dignity. The words landed harder than a shout. He sat beside him, heart pounding, hands folded in my lap. He had spent most of my life calming storms. That night, I watched my son become one. Claudia recovered first. This is absurd, she said. Vanessa uses Whitmore socially. Plenty of women use family names socially. Daniel nodded. Of course. But Vanessa did not simply use another name socially. She changed her legal name to Cole after marrying a man named Bryce Cole in Nevada 3 years ago. A gasp moved down the table. Vanessa's friend Mallory whispered, married. Vanessa turned on her. Don't. Daniel removed another page from the folder. Divorce finalized 16 months later. Sealed financial settlement. Fraud allegations withdrawn after payment. Richard stood halfway. That's enough. No, Daniel said. It isn't. His voice was still calm. That was what made it devastating. Richard glared at him. You have no right to bring this up. Daniel looked almost amused. Your daughter sent me a prenuptial agreement requiring me to transfer premarital assets into a joint marital trust controlled by her family's attorney. She also demanded I sign a reputation protection clause preventing me from discussing any false statement made by her, your company, or your household. It turned to Vanessa. You made my mother sit at a table labeled family friend. You let your guests think she raised me as hired help. You called her the nanny. Vanessa's lips parted. I was joking. Daniel's eyes hardened. You were positioning. That word changed the room. Positioning. A legal word. A strategic word. A word that made even Richard Whitmore sit down slowly. Daniel continued, you wanted my mother erased because you needed me detached. Claudia laughed sharply. Detached from what? A retired nurse. Daniel smiled. My mother owns 40% of Bennett Medical Properties. He stopped breathing. He knew, of course. But I did not know Daniel planned to say it there. Vanessa's face went blank. For the first time all night, she looked not cruel. Confused. That was almost satisfying. Daniel turned toward the table. My father, Thomas Bennett, was not just an attorney. A invested early in outpatient surgical centers. When he passed, my mother inherited his position. She expanded it. Quietly. Claudia stared at me. Richard's wineglass lowered. Vanessa whispered, "You told me she was retired." "She is retired," Daniel said. "From nursing." Marjorie's mouth was slightly open. He wanted to disappear and stand taller at the same time. That had always been my conflict. Thomas had handled business. He had handled hospitals and home. After he died, everyone assumed I had simply become a widow with a pension and memories. They did not see the contracts I reviewed at midnight. They did not see the calls with accountants. They did not see me sell 2 underperforming properties and reinvest in surgery centers. They did not see me learn. People rarely see older women learning. They prefer to imagine us fading. Vanessa had imagined me harmless. Daniel let that mistake bloom. Richard cleared his throat. "Daniel, perhaps this conversation should continue privately." "No," Daniel said. Vanessa preferred public humiliation. We honor her format. Aunt Ruth, Thomas' sister, who had been quiet until then, gave one small cough that sounded suspiciously like approval. Vanessa's face turned red. You're twisting everything. Didn't they tell anyone she was the nanny? People misunderstood. He looked at her then. For the first time that night, I spoke clearly enough for the whole table. "When you saw me walk in, you said, you actually invited the nanny." Who misunderstood that? Her eyes flicked toward her friends. None of them rescued her. That was the thing about public cruelty. It is powerful only until the room decides it is embarrassing. Vanessa turned back to Daniel. "If you hated me so much, why did you propose?" I did not flinch. Because I needed to know how far it went. How far what went? The plan. Claudia stood abruptly. "This is outrageous. Richard, we're leaving." Daniel opened the folder again. "I wouldn't." Richard's face darkened. "Are you threatening my family?" "No," Daniel said. "I'm protecting mine." I lifted another document. "Do you recognize the name Green Harbor Holdings?" Richard went pale. He noticed because I had spent years watching faces in emergency rooms. Color tells the truth before mouths do. Claudia gripped the back of her chair. Vanessa whispered, "Daddy?" Daniel looked at her. "You didn't know?" That was the first real surprise of the night. Vanessa, for all her cruelty, truly did not know what Green Harbor was. Richard did. Claudia did. Daniel continued, "Green Harbor Holdings purchased debt connected to Bennett Medical Properties last spring through a shell structure. Then someone connected to Green Harbor approached me socially through Vanessa." I looked at Richard. "Your company has been trying to force a sale." Richard said nothing. My mouth went dry. He knew about the attempted pressure. Daniel had told me there were business issues connected to Bennett Medical Properties, but not this. Not all of it. It had protected me more than I realized. Vanessa stared at her father. "Is that true?" Richard's face hardened. "This is business." "No," Daniel said. "This was fraud dressed as romance." The room erupted. Whitmore relatives protested. Daniel's colleagues whispered. Claudia demanded the restaurant manager clear the staff. Vanessa kept looking from her father to Daniel as if trying to decide whether she was victim or villain. Maybe both. That was the trouble with people like her. Cruelty did not protect them from being used. It only made them less sympathetic when they were. Then Daniel pulled out one final page. "This," he said, "is the original guest list Vanessa approved." I slid it across the table to me. He looked down. My name was not there. Not as mother. Not as guest. Not at all. At the bottom, in Vanessa's neat digital note, was a comment. "Daniel insists on inviting Eleanor. Seat her away from press-friendly angles." Press-friendly angles. He almost laughed. "What press?" he asked. Daniel looked at Vanessa. "Yes," he said softly. "What press?" The double doors at the back of the dining room opened. A man in a gray suit stepped inside. Tenanoter. A woman followed, holding a leather folder. Richard Whitmore swore under his breath. Daniel stood. Perfect timing, he said. The woman approached the table. Richard Whitmore, she asked. He did not answer. She opened her folder. You've been served. People think revenge is loud. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it is champagne thrown in faces, speeches delivered through tears, diamond rings dropped into wine glasses. But the best revenge I have ever seen arrived in sensible heels, carrying court papers in a leather folder. Richard Whitmore did not take the documents at first. The woman simply placed them on the table in front of him. Service is complete, she said. Then she turned to Claudia. Claudia Whitmore? Claudia looked as if someone had slapped powder from her face. You cannot be serious. The second server handed her another envelope. Then Vanessa. That was when the room truly broke. Vanessa stood so fast her chair toppled backward. I didn't do anything. The process server remained expressionless. Vanessa Marie Cole, also known as Vanessa Marie Whitmore. Her voice cracked. My name is Whitmore. Daniel said quietly, legally, it isn't. She looked at him with hatred. Not heartbreak. Hatred. That told me more than all the documents. The woman served her. Then she left with the two men as calmly as she had entered. The doors closed behind them. No one spoke. Finally, Richard picked up the envelope and opened it. His eyes moved over the first page. Then the second. The color drained from his face. Claudia whispered, Richard? He did not answer. Daniel sat back down. Vanessa stared at him. You planned this? Yes. How long? Long enough. You proposed to me as a trap. Daniel's jaw tightened. No, I proposed to you because I was stupid, lonely, and flattered by attention after Dad died and Mom and I were both grieving in different directions. That admission hurt. Not because it blamed me. Because it was true. After Thomas died, Daniel buried himself in work. I buried myself in staying useful. We stopped talking about pain because the same pain lived in both of us and neither wanted to wake it. Vanessa entered during that silence. She did not create the wound. She found it. Daniel continued, I loved who I thought you were. Then you started correcting my history. My mother became complicated. My father became connected. My childhood became more privileged than I understood. You asked questions about assets before you asked about memories. Vanessa's eyes filled now. But tears do not always mean innocence. Sometimes they mean failure. I was trying to build a future, she said. With my family's money. With you. Daniel shook his head. No. Around me. Richard slammed the papers on the table. This lawsuit is nonsense. Daniel turned toward him. Then court will be easy. Richard's mouth tightened. The lawsuit, I later learned in detail, had been filed by Bennett Medical Properties and two minority partners against Green Harbor Holdings, Whitmore Development, Richard Whitmore personally, and several associated entities. The claims were complicated. Fraudulent interference. Misrepresentation. Improper debt acquisition. Attempted coercion. Breach of confidentiality by a consultant connected to Whitmore Development. But the emotional truth was simple. Richard Whitmore had wanted access to our family company. Vanessa had wanted access to Daniel. They had mistaken charm for entitlement. And they had mistaken me for furniture. Claudia leaned across the table, voice low and venomous. Daniel, think carefully. You are humiliating Vanessa in front of everyone. Daniel looked at her. She humiliated my mother before soup. Claudia's lips pressed together. He should have felt vindicated. He did. But beneath it was grief. Because sitting there beside my son, watching a beautiful engagement dinner collapse into legal warfare, I remembered the little boy who used to bring me dandelions and ask whether Dad would be home for dinner. He remembered Thomas teaching him to tie a tie. He remembered how proud he looked when Daniel got into law school. He remembered thinking, foolishly, that the hardest parts of motherhood ended when a child became successful. They do not. Adult children can still break your heart. They simply do it in better restaurants. Vanessa picked up her champagne flute. For 1 second, I thought she might throw it. Instead, she laughed. A strange, bright laugh that made everyone look at her. You think this makes you noble? She asked Daniel. No. You think choosing your mother over your fiancé makes you some kind of hero? Daniel's expression did not change. I think choosing truth over a fraud makes me awake. Her face twisted. You're pathetic. There she is, he said softly. The words were not loud, but they stripped the room. The version of Vanessa who smiled for cameras vanished. In her place stood a woman cornered by her own reflection. She turned to me. And you, she said. Sitting there like some wounded saint. Don't act innocent. You loved this. You hated me from the beginning because I was taking your son. He looked at her for a long moment. Then I said, no, Vanessa. He disliked you because you treated people according to what you believed they could give you. Her mouth opened. He continued, you were never taking my son. You were taking his judgment. There is a difference. Daniel closed his eyes briefly. Vanessa whispered, you think he'll come running back to you now? No, I said. I think he'll finally have to stand on his own. That silenced him too. Good. Revenge was not me reclaiming Daniel as property. Revenge was making sure no one else could. Richard stood. We are done here. Daniel nodded. The engagement is, yes. Vanessa froze. It was one thing to expose fraud. Another to say the obvious word. Daniel reached into his pocket and placed a ring box on the table. Not open. Closed. I removed the ring from insurance last week. Vanessa stared. The jeweler confirmed it was returned yesterday. Her hand flew to her bare finger. He had not noticed. She had been wearing a diamond that evening, but not the ring Daniel had chosen. A different one. Larger. Colder. Claudia whispered, Vanessa. Daniel looked at her hand. That's not mine. Vanessa's face went white. Richard said, enough. But it was not enough. Not yet. Daniel turned to Vanessa. Where did that ring come from? She said nothing. Daniel's voice hardened. Vanessa. Her friend Mallory suddenly stood. I'm sorry, Mallory said, voice trembling. I can't do this. Vanessa spun toward her. Mallory, sit down. Mallory shook her head. No. You told me Daniel knew. The room froze. Daniel looked at Mallory. Knew what? Mallory's face crumpled. That Bryce was paying for the wedding. Brisicol arrived 16 minutes later. That was the part no one expected. Not even Daniel. Not even Vanessa. Certainly not me. Mallory had barely finished speaking when Vanessa lunged across the table, knocking over a water glass in her rush to silence her. You stupid little. Daniel caught Vanessa's wrist before she reached her friend. Don't. The single word stopped her. Not because she respected it. Because everyone saw it. Vanessa pulled her wrist free and looked around the room like a trapped animal searching for one unlocked door. Mallory cried quietly into her napkin. Claudia demanded to know what she meant. Richard told everyone to calm down. No one calmed down. Daniel asked Mallory one question. Where is Bryce? Mallory looked terrified. I don't know. Vanessa laughed harshly. She's drunk. Eve had half a glass of champagne, Mallory said. Daniel's eyes never left her. Where is Bryce? Mallory whispered, he said he might come. Vanessa went still. That was how we knew. Not from her words. From the way her body understood danger before her pride did. The restaurant manager appeared near the door, pale and anxious. Mr. Bennett. Daniel looked up. There is a gentleman asking to enter. It says his name is Bryce Cole. The entire room seemed to inhale. Vanessa whispered, no. Daniel said, let him in. Richard slammed his hand on the table. You will do no such thing. This is a private family event. Daniel looked at the manager. Let him in. The manager hesitated. Then, perhaps because Daniel's name was on the contract for the room, perhaps because the night had already gone beyond saving, he stepped aside. Bryce Cole walked in wearing a charcoal suit, no tie, and the tired expression of a man who had once believed a beautiful liar and paid dearly for the education. It was not what I expected. He expected arrogance. He expected bitterness. Instead, he looked sad. Sad and prepared. Vanessa stared at him. You shouldn't be here. Bryce looked at Daniel. You asked for documents. He brought them. Vanessa's mouth fell open. Daniel's eyebrows lifted slightly. I asked for copies by email. Bryce gave a humorless smile. After what she did to me? He wanted to see her face. No one blamed him. He approached the table and placed a folder beside Daniel's. Then he looked at me. Mrs. Bennett. Yes. I'm sorry, he said. That surprised me more than almost anything else that night. I know what it feels like to have her rewrite your role in Someone's life. My throat tightened. Thank you, I said. Vanessa laughed. Oh, please. Bryce, you were never some innocent victim. No, he said. I was vain. Lonely. And stupid enough to think being chosen by you meant I had value. His honesty silenced her more effectively than anger could have. It turned to the room. Vanessa and I were married for 14 months. During that time, she convinced my family I was emotionally unstable, convinced me my family resented her because she was too ambitious, and convinced our investors that she had authority to negotiate on behalf of a company she did not own. Richard muttered, this is defamation. Bryce looked at him. You settled. Richard said nothing. Bryce opened the folder. She used the same method with me. I hice Lastchen first. Rebranding second. Asset access third. Daniel's face tightened. Bryce continued, she told my family her parents were funding our future. She told her parents I was funding hers. In reality, she was moving money between accounts and keeping everyone confused long enough to build leverage. Vanessa's hands curled into fists. I was 27, she snapped. You were older. You controlled everything. Bryce nodded. I was older. He should have been wiser. He also should have listened the first time you called my mother, the help, because she drove an older car. That sentence struck the room like a bell. Daniel looked at me. He looked at Vanessa. There it was. Not a mistake. A pattern. Women she could not control became servants in her version of reality. Mothers became obstacles. History became negotiable. Love became access. Bryce pointed to the ring on Vanessa's finger. That diamond belonged to my grandmother. Vanessa covered it with her other hand. Claudia whispered, Vanessa, tell me that's not true. Vanessa did not answer. Bryce's voice stayed calm, but pain moved underneath it. It disappeared during the divorce. She claimed she lost it. Insurance paid part of the claim. He assumed he'd never see it again. Daniel stared at the ring. Vanessa's engagement dinner had become an evidence room. Mallory suddenly said, she told me it was a family heirloom. Bryce almost smiled. It is. Mine. Richard stood again. This time he looked truly afraid. Vanessa, give him the ring. She looked at her father as if he had betrayed her. You're taking his side. I'm taking the side that prevents theft charges in a public restaurant. That was the first honest thing Richard Whitmore said all night. Vanessa slowly removed the ring. Her fingers shook. She placed it on the table, but not near Bryce. Near Daniel. As if she still believed he might protect her from what she had done. Daniel did not touch it. Brice kicked it up with a hand that trembled once, then closed around it. "Thank you," he said. Vanessa whispered, "You're all enjoying this." No one answered. Because some of us were. And some of us were grieving. And some of us were learning that truth can feel like cruelty when it arrives late. The restaurant manager approached again. "I'm sorry," he said, voice strained. "There are reporters outside." Richard's head snapped up. Claudia went pale. Vanessa looked at Daniel with pure hatred. "You called press?" Daniel shook his head. "No." Alas moved to Richard. His face betrayed him. Claudia whispered, "Richard?" Daniel leaned back slowly. Then he began to laugh. Not loudly. Not cruelly. Just in disbelief. "You called them," he said. Richard's face hardened. "We were going to announce a partnership." Vanessa stared at him. "What partnership?" Richard said nothing. Daniel answered. "The one your father planned to announce after I signed the prenup." He looked at Richard. A looked away. Daniel continued, "A family partnership between Whitmore Development and Bennett Medical Properties. Presented as a merger of legacy families." Legacy. There it was again. The word that had circled the table all night like a vulture. Vanessa's voice shook. "Daddy?" Richard did not look at her. Daniel closed the folder. "I almost admire it," he said. "You didn't they just want my signature? You wanted a headline." Outside the doors, muffled voices grew louder. Reporters. At an engagement dinner. To celebrate a business alliance built on a lie. Vanessa looked at her father, then Daniel, then me. And for the first time, I saw it. She had thought she was the hunter. But she had also been bait. The reporters did not get inside. Not then. Le Miroir was too expensive for that kind of chaos. The manager locked the private dining corridor, stationed 2 staff members near the door, and began whispering urgently into a phone. Inside, the room had become divided territory. The Whitmore side huddled around Richard and Claudia. Daniel's colleagues stood near the bar, pretending professional ethics did not allow them to enjoy the collapse of a fraudulent engagement. Brice sat at the far end of the table with Mallory, who looked like she wanted to melt into the floor. Aunt Ruth sat beside me. She leaned close and whispered, "Thomas would have hated this." He nodded. Then she added, "But he would have admired the execution." He almost laughed. Daniel stood at the head of the table. Not where the groom stands to thank everyone for coming. Where a lawyer stands when closing arguments begin. Vanessa faced him from the opposite side, white-knuckled, eyes bright with rage. "You ruined my life," she said. Daniel's expression changed. Not pity. Not anger. Something harder. "No, Vanessa. He interrupted your plan." She flinched. Richard said sharply, "Daniel, stop speaking as if you're in court." Daniel turned toward him. "We may be soon." Claudia touched Richard's arm. "Don't." He saw then that Claudia understood the danger better than her husband. Richard was still calculating optics. Claudia was calculating exposure. Daniel lifted his champagne glass. "For months," he said, "Vanessa told me this dinner would be about family." No one moved. "So let's talk about family." Vanessa's eyes narrowed. Daniel looked at me first. "My mother worked 12-hour shifts for most of my childhood. She missed sleep, not love. She missed dinner sometimes, not responsibility. She knew the names of every teacher I had, every friend I trusted, every fever I faked, every fear I tried to hide. My eyes filled before I could stop them." A continued. "When my father got sick, she became the center of a collapsing world and somehow made it feel steady. When he died, I thought I had lost one parent. But the truth is, I started losing the other one because I was too selfish in my grief to see that she was still standing right in front of me." The room blurred. He looked down at my hands. Aunt Ruth placed her palm over mine. Daniel's voice grew quieter. "Vanessa saw that distance and used it. But she did not create it. He did." And tonight, before any lawsuit, any scandal, any broken engagement, I need to say this publicly. It turned fully toward me. Ma'am, I am sorry. The room disappeared. For 1 second, there was only my son. My boy. The child I had rocked through ear infections. The teenager who stopped hugging me in public. The man who had let silence sit between us until someone else moved into it. Is it, I let you be disrespected because I was afraid admitting Vanessa looked down on you meant admitting I had chosen badly. You let her rewrite parts of our life because correcting her made me feel small. And when she called you the nanny tonight, I knew I had either become the man Dad raised or the coward I was pretending not to be. His voice broke. So I chose. He covered my mouth. He did not want to cry in front of Vanessa. Then I realized that was another old rule. Do not give cruel people evidence of your humanity. But tears are not always weakness. Sometimes they are proof that something frozen has started moving again. Daniel lifted his glass. To Eleanor Bennett, he said. My mother. The woman who raised me. The woman I should have defended sooner. The woman no one at this table will ever mistake for hired help again. Aunt Ruth stood first. Then Brice. Then one of Daniel's colleagues. Then Anoter. One by one, half the room stood and lifted their glasses. The Whitmores remained seated. Vanessa looked as if she might shatter from hatred. He stood slowly. My knees trembled, but my voice did not. Thank you, I said. Daniel lowered his glass. He looked at Vanessa. Then at Richard. Then Claudia. I came tonight prepared to be polite, I said. I have been polite through many things in my life. Through grief. Through loneliness. Through people underestimating me because I did not find it necessary to announce myself. He touched the pearls at my throat. My husband used to tell me, Aggie, don't confuse quiet with consent. He forgot that for a while. The room was silent. He continued. Vanessa, when you called me the nanny, you meant to reduce me. You meant to place me beneath you in a room where you wanted to rise. Her chin lifted. He smiled faintly. But you made one mistake. What? She snapped. You assumed I wanted your place. Her face flickered. I don't. I do not envy you. I do not want your youth, your dress, your father's name, your borrowed ring, or your carefully arranged life. I came here wanting only one thing. Daniel looked at me. He said, to see whether my son remembered who he was. Vanessa laughed bitterly. How touching. Yes, I said. It is. Her laugh died. He turned to Richard. As for business, I will let the attorneys speak. But since you were apparently planning to announce a partnership involving my company and my family, allow me to make our position clear. Richard stared at me. There will be no partnership. His jaw tightened. There will be no merger. Claudia's face went gray. There will be no private settlement disguised as a wedding gift. Daniel looked surprised. Good. He had kept one card of my own. He looked directly at Richard. And tomorrow morning, Bennett Medical Properties will issue a statement confirming that we have rejected all proposals connected to Whitmore Development and its affiliates. Richard stood. You don't understand what you're doing. That was the wrong thing to say. Not because it was rude. Because say every woman over 60 has heard some version of it from a man who assumed age made her ornamental. Ismail. Mr. Whitmore, I kept people alive while they were bleeding through my hands. He learned corporate finance while grieving my husband. I have read every document your people hoped I would be too sentimental to question. He set down my glass. I understand perfectly. Aunt Ruth whispered, Dear God, Aggie. Vanessa stared at me with something new in her expression. Not respect. Fair. That was enough. Then the doors opened again. The restaurant manager stepped inside. Mr. Whitmore, he said carefully, the reporters outside are asking about allegations that Whitmore Development attempted to acquire medical properties through a fraudulent marriage alliance. Richard turned purple. Daniel looked at Brice. Brice held up both hands. Not me. Mallory raised one trembling hand. Everyone looked at her. She swallowed. I may have sent a message to a journalist friend when Vanessa tried to grab me. Vanessa screamed her name. And that was how the engagement dinner finally became the headline Richard Whitmore had always wanted. Just not the one he planned. By the time the dessert course arrived, no one wanted dessert. Chocolate soufflé sat untouched under collapsing centers. Vanessa paced near the windows, phone pressed to her ear, whispering furiously. Claudia stood rigid beside Richard, whose face had taken on the dangerous stillness of a man watching money burn. Daniel spoke quietly with his colleagues. Brice gave a statement to Claire, my attorney, who had apparently been waiting in the main dining room since the first course. That was another thing Daniel had not told me. Claire was there. Ready. Prepared for the moment the night became legal. He sat at the table with Aunt Ruth, staring at my husband's watch still wrapped inside the silver box. He had not given it to Daniel. Not yet. Maybe that sounds cruel. But the truth is, apologies open doors. They do not furnish the room. Daniel had defended me magnificently that night, but one night does not erase months of silence. Aunt Ruth seemed to know what I was thinking. Thomas said to give it when Daniel understood time, she said softly. He looked at her. Strad. Seems is taking the class. Doente mean is graduated. He laughed through my tears. At the far end of the room, Vanessa suddenly ended her call and turned. Her face had changed again. The rage was gone. In its place was softness. A performance of devastation so delicate it might have fooled me before that night. Daniel, she said. I looked up. Can we talk privately? No. Her eyes filled. After everything we were to each other, you won't they even give me 5 minutes? Daniel's jaw tightened. He saw the old pull. The old guilt. Vanessa saw it too. She stepped closer, voice trembling. I made mistakes. I panicked. My father pressured me. You don't know what it's like growing up in this family. Claudia stiffened. Richard said, Vanessa. She ignored him. I loved you, she said to Daniel. Maybe badly. Maybe selfishly. But I loved you. The room watched. Vanessa had found the one weapon that still might work. Not denial. Not anger. Remorse. Daniel closed his eyes. He wanted to stand. Don't interrupt. Don't save him. But saving him from Vanessa had been part of the problem. I needed to hear the song and choose not to dance. Vanessa continued. When your father died, you told me you felt like no one understood how lonely success was without him. He understood that. He was there. Daniel opened his eyes. You were. She stepped closer. I know I hurt your mother. You know I said horrible things. You can apologize. You can, Daniel said. Hope flashed across her face. Then let me. Let me fix this. I looked at her for a long time. Apologize her. Vanessa froze. What? To my mother. Her eyes flicked to me. He sat very still. Daniel said, if you mean it, apologize to her. Not because it saves you. Not because cameras are outside. Not because your father's business is exposed. Apologize because you understand what you did. Vanessa's face tightened. There it was. The limit of the performance. She could cry for Daniel. She could blame her father. She could describe childhood wounds. But to look at the woman she had tried to reduce and offer honest remorse? That required a soul with fewer mirrors. Still, she tried. She walked toward me slowly. Everyone watched. She stopped 2 feet away. Eleanor, she said. Her voice was soft. Careful. I'm sorry you felt disrespected. Aunt Ruth made a sound like a kettle beginning to boil. Daniel's face hardened. He looked up at Vanessa. I did not feel disrespected, I said. I was disrespected. Her lips pressed together. I'm sorry for the misunderstanding. There was no misunderstanding. Her eyes flashed. For 1 second, the mask slipped. Then she forced it back. I'm sorry for what I said. What did you say? The room sharpened around us. Vanessa swallowed. I made a joke. He stood. She stepped back slightly. What did you say? He repeated. Her nostrils flared. I called you the nanny. And why was that wrong? She stared at me. Daniel watched her. Brice watched her. Mallory watched her. The whole room watched the bride discover that an apology is not a sentence you throw over a wound like a napkin. It requires naming the knife. Vanessa whispered, because you're Daniel's mother. And her face flushed. And it was rude. No, I said. Her eyes narrowed. He continued, rude is forgetting to thank a host. Rude is interrupting someone. Rude is chewing with your mouth open. What you did was deliberate humiliation. Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. He said, try again. The words surprised even me. But once spoken, they felt like something I had been owed for years. Vanessa looked at Daniel. It did not help her. She looked at Claudia. Claudia looked away. She looked at Richard. It was reading something on his phone, already more worried about markets than his daughter. That was when Vanessa finally understood. No one was coming. Her face crumpled. But not into humility. Into fury. You want me to crawl, she hissed. No, I said. I want you to tell the truth. She laughed. There it is. Jure just like every other mother who thinks no woman is good enough for her precious son. Daniel moved, but I lifted a hand. This one was mine. Vanessa, if my son married a woman who loved him honestly, I would welcome her. If he married a woman who challenged him kindly, I would thank her. If he married a woman who had nothing but treated people decently, I would give her my pearls. Her eyes dropped to my necklace. But you treated kindness as weakness and family as a ladder. Her face twisted. You don't know anything about me. I know enough. You know what Daniel told you. I know what you showed me. That silenced her. For a moment. Then she smiled. It was the ugliest smile I had ever seen on a beautiful face. Fine, she said. You want truth? Daniel's expression changed. Vanessa turned toward the room. I did call her the nanny. I did tell people she wasn't really part of Daniel's world. Do you know why? Because Daniel let me. The words hit him. Hard. Vanessa pointed at him. He let me make jokes. He let me move her seat. He let me tell people his father's family was the important one. He corrected me tonight because it suited him. Because he wanted revenge. But don't pretend he's some loyal son. He handed me the eraser. The room went silent. Daniel's face went pale. He felt the blow too. Because it was cruel. And because it was partly true. That was Vanessa's gift. She could mix poison with enough truth that swallowing became tempting. She looked at me. So if you want someone to blame for disappearing you, start with him. Then she picked up her purse and walked toward the doors. No one stopped her. But before she reached them, Claire stepped into her path. Ms. Cole, Claire said, one more thing. Vanessa laughed. Of course. Clyde handed her a document. Vanessa glanced down. What is this? Clyde smiled politely. A notice preserving evidence related to the defamation of Eleanor Bennett. Vanessa's face changed. Claire added, including any written or recorded statement identifying Mrs. Bennett as hired staff, domestic help, or non-family for the purpose of influencing social, financial, or contractual arrangements. Vanessa looked at Daniel. Then at me. For the first time, she understood that humiliating me had not only been cruel. It had been useful. And useful lies leave paper trails. The next morning, I woke to my name in the news. Not everywhere. Not nationally. But enough. Local business sites. A legal gossip newsletter. 2 finance blogs. A society page that had clearly been waiting years for something unpleasant to happen to the Whitmores. The headline that made me laugh despite everything was: Engagement dinner implodes amid alleged business scheme, ex-husband, and mystery mother-in-law. Mystery mother-in-law. At least I had been promoted from nanny. Daniel called at 7:18 de la mañana. I watched his name light up my phone. For 11, I let it ring. Not to punish him. To remind myself I had a choice. Then I answered. Good morning, I said. His voice was rough. Morning. You sound terrible. I didn't sleep. Neither did many people, I imagine. A pause. Then he said, Ma'am, what Vanessa said before she left was partly true. Silence. I know, he whispered. Good. If he had denied it, I might have hung up. It continued, I let it happen. Not all of it. Bad enough. Yes. I hate myself for that. That may be appropriate for a while. Don't move in permanently. A surprised laugh broke out of him, then disappeared. I'm sorry. I know. No, ma'am. I am sorry in a way I don't think I understood until she said it out loud. I thought not agreeing was the same as objecting. I thought being uncomfortable was the same as protecting you. I looked out my kitchen window. Morning light rested on the herb pots. My house was quiet. Many men confuse silence with neutrality, I said. It usually protects the person doing harm. Exhaled. Yes. There was another pause. Then he said, the company statement goes out at 10. I know. Claire sent it. Are you sure you want your name included? He smiled faintly. There it was. My son, still learning that concern can sound like control. Yes. It will bring attention. I have survived worse than attention. I just don't want you dragged into. Daniel. A stopped. I was dragged into this when your fiancé called me hired help to make me socially disposable. His breathing changed. You're right. I know you want to protect me now. But part of repairing this is understanding that I am not protected by being hidden. It was quiet for a long time. Then he said, okay. At 10 o'clock, Bennett Medical Properties released the statement. It was not emotional. Claire would have set herself on fire before allowing that. The statement confirmed that Bennett Medical Properties had rejected any partnership or acquisition proposal from entities affiliated with Whitmore Development, Green Harbor Holdings, or Richard Whitmore. It stated that the company had initiated legal proceedings regarding alleged improper interference and misrepresentation. It clarified that Eleanor Bennett was a principal owner and board member. Then came the final line. MRS, Bennett has never been employed as domestic staff by the Bennett family or any related household. Any representation to the contrary is false. I read that line 5 times. Not because I needed the world to know I was not a nanny. There is no shame in being a nanny. There is honor in caregiving. The shame was in the lie. In being assigned a role to remove my rights. By noon, Vanessa's social media accounts went private. By 2, Richard Whitmore's company postponed an investor call. By 4, Bryce Colley's attorney confirmed that the recovered ring had been reported to insurers. By evening, Mallory sent me an email. Dear MRS, Bennett. I am sorry I laughed when Vanessa said those things about you. I knew it was wrong. I wanted her approval more than I wanted to be decent. That is not an excuse. I stared at the email for a while. Then I replied. Dear Mallory. Thank you for telling the truth when it became difficult. That was all. Not forgiveness. Not friendship. Just acknowledgement. Sometimes that is enough. 3 days later, Vanessa came to my house. Not alone. With Claudia. I watched them through the camera at the gate. Claudia sat in the passenger seat of a black Mercedes, sunglasses on, posture rigid. Vanessa stood beside the call box wearing a beige coat and no makeup. She looked younger without the armor. That did not make her safer. He pressed the speaker. Yes. Vanessa looked up. Eleanor. Please. Claudia leaned out the window. Mrs. Bennett, we are not here to cause trouble. He almost laughed. People who have caused trouble often announce their peaceful intentions as if arriving at a border crossing. What do you want? Vanessa swallowed. Toe palejais. You had an opportunity. I know. Several, actually. Her face tightened, but she nodded. I know. Claudia said, may we come in? No. She blinked. It was clearly not the answer she expected. Vanessa looked embarrassed. Good. Embarrassment is not fatal. Many people need more of it. She said, then ye say it here. He waited. She gripped her purse strap with both hands. I called you the nanny because I wanted people to think you didn't matter. There it was. No declaración. No misunderstanding. No if you felt. The truth stood bare at my gate. Vanessa continued. I wanted Daniel to feel separate from you. He thought if he saw you as small, he'd see me as the better future. Her voice cracked. I was cruel. He watched her face. For once, she did not seem to be performing. But I had been wrong before. She said, I am sorry. Claudia looked away, jaw tight. He asked, are you sorry because you hurt me, or because it failed? Vanessa flinched. A long silence followed. Then she whispered, both. That was probably the most honest answer she had ever given me. He respected it more than a prettier lie. He said, thank you for saying it. Hope flickered in her face. Does that mean? No. The hope vanished. No. It means I heard you. It does not mean you are welcome in my home. It does not mean the legal consequences disappear. It does not mean Daniel owes you another conversation. Her eyes filled. I loved him. Perhaps. That seemed to hurt more than if I had denied it. He continued, but love that requires erasing someone else is not love mature enough for marriage. Claudia finally spoke. Mrs. Bennett, with respect, Vanessa is facing consequences that may follow her for years. He looked at her through the camera. With respect, Claudia, so was I. She looked stunned. I said, the difference is that your daughter's consequences come from what she did. Mina would have come from what she lied about. No one spoke. Then Claudia nodded once. Teeny. Reluctant. Betrayal. Vanessa wiped her face. Tell Daniel I came? No, I said. You may tell him yourself through counsel if appropriate. A small bitter smile crossed her mouth. You're tougher than you look. He smiled back. I know. They left. He stood at the gate monitor long after their car disappeared. Then I turned it off. For years, I had feared becoming hard. But boundaries are not hardness. They are shape. And at last, I was beginning to recognize my own. Daniel came to my house one week after the dinner. I did not use his key. I did not have one. That was not punishment. It was accuracy. I rang the doorbell. When I opened the door, he stood on the porch holding yellow tulips. Not roses. Not lilies. Tulips. The flowers he used to buy from grocery store buckets on Mother's Day when he was in college and broke. I know flowers don't fix anything, he said. No, I replied. But they brighten a room. I smiled faintly. May I come in? May. There are phrases children learn early and adults forget when love makes them careless. He stepped aside. We sat in the kitchen, because every important conversation in our family had happened in kitchens. I looked around. You changed the curtains. 6 months ago. Oh. That small word carried shame. 6 months of not noticing. 6 months of drive-by calls and distracted texts. 6 months of Vanessa's voice in the background asking when he would be done. He made tea. I did not check his phone. That, though, was new. After a while, he said, the lawsuit is going to get ugly. Yes. Richard is claiming I pursued Vanessa to get inside information about Whitmore development. Did you? No. Then let him claim. Daniel looked at me. Jure very calm. Ibe spent enough time in hospitals to know panic rarely improves outcomes. A laughed quietly. Then silence returned. A placed both hands around his mug. I keep thinking about Dad. So do I. What would he say? That question nearly undid me. Thomas had been dead 7 years, and still some part of me turned toward the hallway expecting to hear his answer. He would say you made a terrible mess. Daniel winced. Then he would ask what you planned to do next. A nodded slowly. That sounds like him. And then, I added, after you left the room, he would stand at the sink and cry because seeing you hurt always destroyed him. Daniel's eyes filled. I miss him. I know. I think I used missing him as an excuse to stop seeing you. There it was. Not the whole truth. But a deep one. He said, grief can make people selfish. I was selfish before grief. He smiled sadly. Sometimes. I laughed through tears. Then he looked at me. Can't you forgive me? He had known the question would come. He had practiced answers. So me generis. So me cold. None felt right. So I told the truth. I have already forgiven parts of you, I said. His face changed. Parts. Yes. The boy who was lost after his father died. The man who was manipulated. The son who finally stood up at that table. I forgive those parts. I swallowed. And the rest. The rest has work to do. I nodded. No argument. That matter. He rose and walked to the dining room cabinet. The silver box was still there. I had placed it beside Thomas' photograph after the dinner and left it untouched. Now I carried it back to the kitchen. Daniel stared at it. What is that? He sat across from him. Your father's watch. His face went still. He wanted you to have it. He pushed the box toward him. Not because you became perfect. Not because one speech erased everything. But because last week, for the first time in a long time, I saw you understand that time can be wasted by cowardice. Daniel's mouth trembled. He continued. Your father said to give it to you when you became the kind of man who understands time. I don't think you fully understand it yet. I let out a broken laugh. But you're beginning to. I opened the box. Inside lay Thomas' watch, gold and worn at the edges, the leather strap carefully replaced but the face original. Daniel touched it like it might vanish. I remember this, he whispered. You wore it the day you were born. Daniel covered his face with one hand. He looked away, giving him the dignity of not being watched too closely. After a while, he said, I don't deserve it. No, I said. I looked up, startled. Not yet. Grow into it. I cried then. Not dramatically. Not loudly. Quietly, like a man finally old enough to mourn what he had almost become. He reached across the table. I took my hand. For the first time in years, he held it like a son. Not like a man managing an obligation. Not like someone humoring his mother before returning to a more important life. Son. Outside, rain began tapping the windows. For a moment, I was back in that kitchen years earlier, Thomas alive somewhere in the house, Daniel small enough to lift, the world still full of things I did not know I would lose. Then Daniel spoke. There is something else. My hand tightened. Of course there was. He wiped his face and pulled an envelope from his jacket. I found this in Vanessa's apartment when I went to collect my things. She had copies of your old medical license, Dad's estate documents, and this. I slid the envelope across the table. Inside was a printed draft email addressed to Richard Whitmore. Subject. Eleanor Strategy. My blood went cold. I read the first line. If Daniel resists signing, pressure point remains mother. A is ashamed of her background and defensive when confronted directly. E stopped reading. Not because I could not bear it. Because I needed one breath before I decided how much of my life I would allow cruel people to narrate. Daniel whispered, "Ma'am." E looked up. His face was devastated. She thought I was ashamed of you because I acted like I was. There are sentences that ask for comfort. This one deserved truth. Yes, I said. A closed his eyes. Then I read the rest. The strategy was simple. Diminish me socially. Suggest I was financially unsophisticated. Frame my involvement in Bennett Medical Properties as symbolic. Encourage Daniel to move assets before marriage. Use Claudia to mentor me publicly if necessary. At the bottom, Vanessa had written. Once Eleanor is repositioned, Daniel will comply. Repositioned. Not convinced. Not respected. Repositioned. Like furniture. He folded the paper carefully. Daniel said, "Claire needs that." "Yes," I said. Back before I called Claire, I did something for myself. I took Thomas's watch from the box and fastened it around Daniel's wrist. He stared at it. Then at me. He said, "Now you know what they tried to do with your shame." His jaw tightened. "Yes." "Good. Never make me pay for it again." Nadie. Y won't they. For the first time, I believed he knew what that promise cost. The Whitmore story did not end quickly. Stories involving rich people and lawyers rarely do. They dissolve slowly through filings, countersuits, private negotiations, leaked emails, reputation consultants, and carefully worded statements that say very little in expensive language. Richard Whitmore resigned from 2 boards within a month. Whitmore Development lost a major financing partner. Green Harbor Holdings became the subject of regulatory interest. Claudia disappeared from charity events for a season, then returned wearing darker colors and a tighter smile. Vanessa left the city. Some said she went to Palm Beach. Some said London. Mallory said Scottsdale. He did not care enough to verify. Brice recovered his grandmother's ring and sent me a handwritten note. Mrs. Bennett. Thank you for being braver in one night than I was in 14 months. He kept that note. Not because I needed praise. Because it reminded me that truth often arrives late, but it still arrives. Daniel changed too. Not perfectly. People rarely transform as dramatically as stories want them to. He still worked too much. He still apologized awkwardly. He still sometimes reached for old habits, like trying to protect me by withholding unpleasant information. But now I called him on it. And now he listened. That was the difference. 3 months after the engagement dinner, Bennett Medical Properties held its annual board reception. For years, I had avoided the spotlight at those events. Thomas had enjoyed rooms full of investors and doctors. He preferred the quiet work before and after. Reviewing reports. Asking questions. Spotting inflated projections. Remembering which surgical center needed new equipment before an administrator admitted it. After Thomas died, I kept showing up, but quietly. That year, Claire insisted I give the opening remarks. "No," I said immediately. "Yes," she replied. "I hate speeches." "You hate being underestimated more." That was unfortunately true. So on a clear September evening, I stood in the ballroom of the Ashford Hotel wearing a deep green dress, Thomas pearls, and no apology. Daniel sat in the front row with Aunt Ruth. On his wrist was his father's watch. When I stepped to the microphone, the room quieted. For once, I did not wonder who thought I belonged there. He knew. "Good evening," I said. "For those who don't know me, my name is Eleanor Bennett." He paused. Then smiled. Not family friend. Not symbolic shareholder. Not Aunt Johnny's nanny. Laughter moved through the room. Daniel lowered his head, smiling. He continued. "I am board chair of Bennett Medical Properties." The words felt strange in my mouth. Then solid. Then meaning. He spoke for 9 minutes. About growth. About ethics. About why medical spaces should serve patients before investors. About the danger of people who look at caregiving and see weakness instead of infrastructure. Many of us, I said, have been taught to overlook quiet labor. The nurse who notices. The mother who remembers. The administrator who prevents disaster before it earns a headline. The widow who reads the contract everyone assumed she would sign. More laughter. Softer this time. Warmer. Let this be our guiding principle going forward. We do not confuse quiet with consent. We do not confuse kindness with access. And we do not build partnerships with people who require someone else to be made smaller before they feel large. When I finished, the room stood. I do not remember deciding to look at Daniel. But I did. It was standing too. Clapping. Crying. Una samed. Afterward, he found me near the windows overlooking the city. Dad would have loved that speech, he said. Ismail. He would have corrected my pacing. Daniel laughed. Yes. Then he would have bragged about you to everyone within 10 feet. He looked at the watch on his wrist. It suits you. It touched it lightly. I am trying to suit it. That was a better answer than any promise. We stood quietly for a while. Then he said, I am seeing someone. My eyebrows lifted. Already? Winced. Not like that. Kofi. Twice. Her name is Nora. She teaches high school history. She knows everything. Does she? She asked about you before she asked what car I drive. I like her already. Ismail. I told her the truth. About Vanessa. About me. That mattered more. And she said men who learn late are still responsible for learning well. He laughed. I really like her. I looked nervous. I'd like you to meet her eventually. Eventually, I said. Yes. When you're ready. Another phrase adults often forget. When you're ready. He touched his arm. That would be nice. Not because I needed to approve the next woman. Not because he needed my permission. Because we were learning how to stand near each other without handing our lives over. 6 months after the engagement dinner, Daniel invited me to his home for Sunday dinner. Not a restaurant. Not an event. His apartment. Small, clean, with too many law books and not enough lamps. I cooked pasta. Slightly overdone. I burned garlic bread. Nora was there. She was warm, observant, and wore no diamonds. When Daniel introduced me, he said, "This is my mother, Eleanor Bennett." No hesitation. No correction. No shrinking. Nora smiled and held out her hand. "I've heard so much about you," she said. He raised one eyebrow at Daniel. "A blast." "Good things," Nora added. We ate at a little wooden table by the window. Halfway through dinner, Daniel reached for the salad bowl and his sleeve slipped back. Thomas' watch caught the light. For one strange, beautiful second, I could almost see my husband sitting there with us. Not as a ghost. As influence. As time. As proof that love, when properly honored, does not control the living. It steadies them. After dinner, Daniel walked me to my car. The air was cool. Leaps moved along the curb. Somewhere upstairs, Noah laughed at something Aunt Ruth had said on speakerphone. Daniel hugged me. Not quickly. Not out of duty. A real hug. "I love you, Mom," he said. "I love you too." It pulled back. I should have said it more. Yes. It laughed softly. "You don't let me get away with anything anymore." "No," I said. "I raised you. You know what you're capable of surviving." I nodded. He drove home through quiet streets, past glowing windows and restaurants closing for the night. At the red light, I caught my reflection in the windshield. Pearls. Silver hair. Soft lines at my mouth. A woman who had once almost walked out of an engagement dinner because someone called her the nanny. A woman whose son had taken her hand and asked her to trust him. A woman who had learned that revenge is not always destruction. Sometimes revenge is correction. A name restored. A seat reclaimed. A son made honest. A liar exposed. A mother no longer willing to stand at the edge of the room. When I got home, I placed my purse on the entry table and walked to the dining room. Thomas' photograph stood on the sideboard. He touched the frame. Is learning, I whispered. The house was quiet. Peaceful. Mine. The next morning, a courier delivered a final envelope from Vanessa's attorney. Inside was a signed retraction. One paragraph. Dry language. No emotion. Vanessa Marie Cole retracts all statements, written or verbal, suggesting Eleanor Bennett was employed as domestic staff, non-family personnel, or socially irrelevant to Daniel Bennett or the Bennett family. Socially irrelevant. He laughed so hard I had to sit down. Then I placed the retraction in a folder with the lawsuit papers, the strategy email, my Jordy's apology, Brice's note, and a copy of my speech. Not because I planned to read them often. Because some women build memory boxes for weddings, births, and anniversaries. He built one for the night I stopped disappearing. Years from now, if I am lucky enough to become an old woman with a granddaughter or a young nurse or some lonely mother sitting at my kitchen table asking how to survive being underestimated, I will open that folder. He will show her the papers. He will tell her this. They may call you small because they need you small. They may rename you because your real name carries power. They may put you at the wrong seat and hope you thank them for the invitation. Do not mistake their version of you for the truth. What? Watch. Document. Stand. And when the moment comes, take your rightful place at the head of the table.